So I want to start by thanking many of the people in the audience who disagree with us about some or many points, but keep coming back nevertheless, to hear what a conversation between two people who are interested in discovering the truth sounds like, and hopefully also to learn, to figure out where you might be wrong, where we might be wrong, where maybe both of us are wrong, not just both of us, but your understanding and our understanding might both be wrong on something. We've heard directly from many of you, and we appreciate you. In the last couple of weeks, though, we've noticed an uptick in people offering critique that isn't really critique. It's fascinating, really, what agendas and traits people will attribute to others when what they actually want to say is, I disagree and I can't defend the disagreement. So there are lots of names for the various fallacies, ad hominem being one of them, where you attack the person rather than the ideas. There may well be reason to disagree with us on any number of fronts, but saying, for instance, as I've heard a number of times now, you have secure jobs, so it's easy to defend the lockdown, is a non-argument. Pointing out possible conflicts of interest for people making arguments is a legitimate approach, but this one isn't. Aside from that,
it's also not accurate.
Aside from that, this particular accusation doesn't turn out to be true, right? We have secure jobs so lockdown is meaningless to us, just isn't true. Most listeners will know, in fact, that we did have secure jobs that appeared secure anyway, that were supposed to be secure for life. But Brett and then I stood up to the loons who had taken over the college where we were tenured. And so very long story short, we're not college professors anymore, and we haven't been for closing in on 3 years this fall. We don't have an employer, so we don't have salaries, and we don't have employer-sponsored healthcare. We do have reach, though, now, far more than we did when we were professors, and that has allowed us to do these live streams and find audience. And that reach was also necessary in getting the wonderful book contract that we've got. And so I'm not saying this to complain, but I am saying that reach is not the same as security or salary. And with regard to the particular topics that we are often interested in raising, reaching people may in fact be in a trade-off relationship with security. So I still believe that the vast number of people on both sides of the aisle, that is the political metaphor stemming from the truth in the United States Senate, that people, Democrats and Republicans, sit literally on opposite sides of the aisle. People on both sides of the aisle are good-hearted, good faith, and legitimately interested in hearing what people of different opinions have to say. I think the vast majority of people, that is true for. But I see a world that is polarizing fast, and we've alluded to this in maybe each of our last live streams, that we see this star-bellied Sneetches and Sneetches without landscape, people wearing masks and people without, people wearing MAGA hats and people without. And it's become this easy tell by which you can imagine that you know everything else that's true about a person and not think any further about what might be true of them. I want to say that more and more people on the far left, but what we're seeing right now is more and more people on the far right are taking personal umbrage at those who see the world differently from them, and take it as evidence that those people with whom they disagree are themselves stupid or incompetent or even evil. And one of the upshots of our rather dramatic expulsion from Evergreen is that many good people on the right are familiar with us now and find value in what we say. This has, I think, led algorithms by YouTube and the like to promote our videos along with those of actual right-leaning people. In fact, I spent a little time logged in, not as myself, looking to see what videos were suggested after ours, and sure enough, it looks like we've been logged that way in among some right-leaning videos, which is not in and of itself a bad thing, but it does mean that when the uninitiated, when those people who don't know us click on our videos and find us critiquing bad ideas across the board, bad ideas on the right and bad ideas on the left, we're more likely to hear objections from people on the right because they're more likely to have had their expectations broken by the algorithms. And by us, but not because we were ever dishonest about what we are. We're on the left. We've been saying that forever, even as the pseudo-progressives at Evergreen called us racists and fascists and Nazis and all that jazz. People on the left get upset when we don't critique Trump or the Republicans enough. And when we do critique policies coming out of the White House, we are told that we're only critiquing them because we're knee-jerk lefties. Can't win. Except we're trying to thread this needle, walk this line carefully. And I want to say that Trump derangement syndrome is real. And some people can't see anything coming from the current administration as positive or potentially positive. But TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, has a mirror image syndrome, which I'll call pro-Trump derangement syndrome. And the pro-Trump derangement syndrome guys can't abode any critique of the man's actions or policies. And that's just as knee-jerk and just as deranged, frankly. So that's not how democracy works. It's not how we, any of us, not just Brett and me, but any of us refine our understanding of the world to make it a better and better match for reality. We need people to share information, to analyze it, and we need critique of both the information and the analysis. We need to imagine that with rare exceptions, nobody is wholly wrong and nobody is wholly right. I think that some of where this confusion is coming from can be found in how science is actually taught. We have here and elsewhere critiqued modern education and specifically modern science education quite a lot, and we will continue to do so. But how science is taught and therefore understood by much of the population is you're given litanies of facts to memorize at school, and you aren't offered a dive into the scientific method, which is in fact the core of science. So if what you think science is a rote list of facts that are true, have always been understood to be true, and will always be understood to be true, you will think that uncertainty is failure and it's unsciency. But in fact, it's the exact opposite. Uncertainty is not failure. Total certainty, in fact, especially in the face of new and rapidly changing landscapes like the one we find ourselves in with this pandemic, is anti-scientific. Total certainty will likely sell soda and chips and anxiety and despair, but it's not going to help anyone gain understanding. It's like everyone wants superheroes and supervillains, but has never actually fact-checked to see if they've ever met any of those. Not only are superheroes and supervillains vanishingly rare, if not completely non-existent, news accounts are often going to be a mixed bag as well, as are scientific results. This is to be expected. This is what complexity looks like. Demanding certainty and categorical results is a juvenile position. What you'll get if you demand certainty and categorical results is garbage sold to you and less understanding of what the world is, how it works, and how you might change it for the better. So in conclusion, before I hand off to you, we're going to be wrong sometimes. Everyone's going to be wrong sometimes. And also sometimes the reality that we discover or that we reveal that other people have discovered through scientific analysis or just through the passage of time, as for instance, this virus reveals itself to be something that we don't currently understand it to be, it's going to be ugly sometimes and not to our liking. That everyone is sometimes wrong first, and that reality is sometimes ugly are universal truths. You can't change reality, though, by denying it or by calling the people talking about it bad names or ascribing motives to them that don't exist or are irrelevant to the conversation. You could, however, understand that reality as best as you can and use that newfound knowledge in useful and honorable ways.
Wow, that's excellent. There's a lot there that gives voice to some things I've been thinking as well. I didn't get all the way to coming up with a name for whatever the mirror image of Trump derangement syndrome is, but I have been thinking, I have never seen anything like this before. The idea of a president who is beyond critique is an absurdity, and we can argue whether, Trump is much more deserving of critique than others who might inhabit the office. But nonetheless, the very idea that you can't critique him without evidencing some sort of a confusion or a hidden agenda or something like that is very upsetting. And I think there's a way in which it actually emerges from the man himself. And I'm reminded when we were college professors, and it was not infrequent that we would end up advising students. We knew our students quite well because of the way Evergreen worked. So our students were full-time students in our single program that we taught. And, we knew them all by name. We knew many of their lives pretty well. And they would ask us for advice. And one of the pieces of advice that I found myself giving very frequently was Don't even consider marrying anybody who doesn't have a sense of humor about themselves. They're just not marriage material, which I think is an upsetting problem because there are a lot of people in that category, and it's sad to think that they may not be appropriate for a relationship. But wow, I wouldn't elect anybody president who didn't have a sense of humor about themselves either. And while this president does an awful lot of joking, it is almost always at other people's expense. And he is incredibly thin-skinned when any critique comes his way, which in light of the fact that he does not appear to be expert in the kinds of things that he's being called upon to navigate is very troubling indeed. So if I can just add one final thing, you can tell very frequently what kind of person someone is based on how they deal with the discovery that they have been incorrect. Now, one thing you can do is you can rationalize and sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Now you're wrong twice. Not only were you wrong the first time, but your claim to have always been in the position that you now hold is also wrong. So that is not an indication of character. And we will be wrong. We have been wrong here, and we have been careful, I think, each time we've been wrong in a significant way to come back and say, here's where it was, and here's how the error happened. And boy, let me tell you, it's not fun. I would very much like to be right. I don't like discovering that I'm wrong, and doing it in front of a large audience is very difficult. But the point is, wow, is it a better deal than sticking with some wrong position so as not to admit that you made an error, which is, of course, human.
And it's always hard to navigate. When do you say, I'm putting my internal estimation at 95% on this thing, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, and with without the sort of the error bars built in, and then okay, maybe it's that 1 in 20 times that I was wrong, and you have to come back and fix it, or you speak in terms of uncertainties and probabilities. And, more often than not numbers explicitly, but implicit numerical thinking, quantitative thinking. And that drives a lot of people crazy, not just because, again, our educational system is so bad that most people who should completely be able to understand some quantitative thinking actually can't through no fault of their own often. But it also doesn't fit with a landscape of buy it now, get your answer, be on your way, have the thing in your back pocket that you have to say when someone asks you a question, and don't think about it ever again. There is no set and forget over in scientific discovery space. You can't do it that way.